been a BTS fan for long enough, you probably had the exact same conversation about the Grammys for about 700 times already. But just in case you might have missed it, basically the Grammys introduced a new category that seeks to recognize the Asian pop market. And this obviously applies to genres like K-pop, which seems to be at the root of the discourse right now because BTS has been the center of what is defined and thought about when we talk about K-pop. However, BTS did something that nobody was expecting. Why would BTS reject something that seems designed to recognize them? That seems a little bit ironic, but let's talk about it. The Recording Academy officially introduced the Best Asian Pop Music Performance on June 16, 2026. But just a couple of weeks ago, it was that BTS collectively posted an announcement that they would not be submitting for this year's Grammys. And that came, at least for me, as a little bit of a shock. I mean, not really, because we knew that since the release of this category, there was a disaster incoming. And I'm really glad that they stood up for themselves in this regard, because what the fuck were they thinking? So as I've mentioned, this category serves the purpose and objective to recognize Asian artists within the pop category. And this has been something that I remember has been in discussions for a while now. I even remember that they were thinking of doing a separate event, like a Grammy event, just to recognize Asian music, obviously with K-pop in mind. Just like the Latin Grammys, you know, how they have their own event and then they have like the main Grammys, which I find a little bit ridiculous, but like it exists and they wanted to do that. I remember that quite well. And I think that first step to get there was going to be this Asian pop category. But anyways, why am I even talking about this? I've been listening to BTS for over a decade now. I've been a fan of them since I was a little teenager. I went through all of the phases imaginable a 12-year-old army could have gone through. I had BTS shirts, unofficial merch. I mean, in my school show and tell, I even did a presentation of Spring Day in front of my entire fucking class. Looking back to it, it really was one of my most humbling experiences, but you know, it had to happen. It's called character development for a reason. So right now that I'm a little bit more grown, I would consider myself more calm in that case. I mean, I still love them. I literally just went to their concert with my mom. It was the first time in my life that I ever go to a BTS concert in all of this time. So that meant a lot to me. Just that I don't go crazy like that anymore, which is usually what happens when you grow older. Not for everybody though, like I understand that part. I won't be the judge of that at all. So yeah, I mean, I was there both times when they were nominated for the first time. I was there when they lost to Lady Gaga and Twitter became literally worse than hell. I watched the stream as they were announcing that category, and seeing them be truly excited at even the remote possibility of winning a Grammy, it meant a lot. I say this because I consider it's important to establish for you where I am currently at and why I'm even speaking about this. And also, as an avid music enjoyer, I do musical analysis on topics that I enjoy, mostly on Instagram and TikTok, but I am slowly starting to transfer to YouTube. I do talk about music, and the Grammys have been an event that I've been following for so long. So I'm trying to offer both of my perspectives here as a fan and as a Grammy watcher. BTS first got nominated for the Grammys with their song Dynamite, which absolutely blew up. I don't think I even have to explain about this, but seeing their reactions when they first got nominated, it was really clear not only for the fans, but to everybody what the Grammys meant for a group like BTS. From growing in a small company in South Korea to now getting nominated in what's defined by the general industry as the biggest night and the most prominent and prestigious award in music. So really made you reflect on the whole journey that BTS had gone through to get to that point. However, what happens next is really where we have to discuss about this whole issue, because we knew that the numbers that BTS had were absolutely phenomenal. There's a reason why even after years of not releasing music, they come back and they have the biggest, most profitable, most sold album in the year. That's absolutely insane to even think about. But to understand this issue, I think we really need to dive deep into what the Grammys are actually supposed to be and why they mean that much for an artist, not only from the US, but from all over the world. So the central question would be, what are the Grammys actually measuring? Are they measuring musical excellence, artistic quality, commercial success, popularity in the United States, or some sort of combination of all of these factors? I think it is very clear that the Grammys do not measure only the musical aspect when nominating an act or a song, a record. They also other factors that come at play, as there is the Western relevance, industry visibility, cultural presence, and how relevant an artist is to the American music industry. Because of that comes the question, why does my music need to appeal to the Western audience if my music is from the other side of the world, where my target is some other type of people? Why is that being measured? I think the only logical answer to that would be that the Grammys are based in the United States. I mean, not only for music, it happens with film, with art, where the hub of entertainment is the United States, and they have been the hub of entertainment for a while now. So I think that is part where the problem surges from, because the Grammys are fundamentally and literally an American-based organization. What I'm trying to say is that music is obviously part of the whole equation when trying to nominate an artist, but it is not the only thing that is being measured. And here comes another question worth having. If the Grammys were purely about musical quality, would every nominee we consider a great artist actually be nominated? Probably not. I don't think big artists that frequently top the charts would even be nominated, because realistically there are hundreds of millions of records released every single year. Artists from outside the Western mainstream who break through are often recognized once they become relevant within the Western industry structures, because whether we like it or not, global success doesn't necessarily equal Grammy relevance. But for an institution that calls themselves the biggest night in music, how is that fair to people that were born on the other side of the world? How does that make it fair in the first place? The answer to that is very simple. It is not. And you can take that as you will when there are certain barriers that you have to keep facing. And primarily, who gets to define the framework for recognizing global music? So let's jump back to BTS for a second. Now, saying that this introduction of this category was made with bad faith, I think it's a little bit of a stretch. I'd like to think, I really would like to think that they created this category. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here with no bad intentions in mind. I'd like to think that they wanted to recognize these artists that are normally having more barriers of entry to this institution, but the means that they did it with is very harmful to the Asian pop artists. Because first and foremost, Asian pop is not a genre of music. It has never been. Because then we'll be recognizing an artist simply for the fact of where they come from, of their language, rather than musical excellence. And I think that's something so stupid. I'm sorry, as I said before, I'm second guessing them. I'd like to think that they didn't do this with bad faith, but the means and the way that it comes across, specifically when BTS comes back, introducing this category, seems like they wanted to set BTS apart, and I completely understand the frustration that BTS had. As I said before, it's generally something that they have been striving for so many years. Like, the Grammys meant a lot to them, so I can only imagine the pain that it meant for them taking a step back from what they fought so hard for, just because the industry was not recognizing them the way that they deserve. I remember since the beginning of time, K-pop has always been a major source of discussion of what it should be classified as, and primarily what entails being K-pop in the first place. Because there are some people coming here saying that K-pop should be defined as the artist that sings it, so that would entail people that come from South Korea make pop music, should that define them as K-pop regardless of the language? And then there's the other kind of people that say that K-pop should be defined as using Korean language in their pop music. But then comes the question, if I am a white-skinned individual, I learned Korean for the first time in my fucking life, and sing a song in Korean, should I be classified as K-pop? I think there's a very big paradox here. I don't think there's a right answer. I don't think there's a wrong answer. K-pop itself is quite confusing because there's a lot of genres that cover that spectrum. You have artists like Dreamcatcher making rock type music, and on the other side of the spectrum you have artists like Twice, which make more bubbly, upbeat type of music generally, but somehow both are on the spectrum of what's defined as K-pop. If you ask somebody, they most certainly will tell you that both of these groups are K-pop. So what really is defined as K-pop in the first place? As I said before, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think there's a whole paradox going on what should be fucking classified as K-pop. But as I said before, I don't think this whole category should be specifically focused on the language aspect or the ethnicity aspect of a song or of a project, because that would undermine the whole idea of what music actually is. If you don't know, they have like hundreds and hundreds of categories in the Grammys, and they only announce like 5 of them at the main event. But the other categories are the categories that seek to recognize different genres, like rock, electronic music, country, and I mean, you get the idea. But if we're starting to recognize artists and records based on their ethnicity and language, does that mean that a language becomes a genre on its own? I don't think so. I mean, they've done this with Latin music, as I mentioned, but I think Latin music is really a massive, humongous industry, so that's why I think they're doing something like that. When you are incorporating a category to recognize a more diverse spectrum of people and it ends up doing the exact opposite from what you intended, that is a problem. So I want you to think about the question, is creating a separate category actually helping the cause? Because we can argue about how it means more representation, more visibility, more awards, more opportunity for artists who otherwise might get overlooked. But at the same time, they are creating a ceiling and a limit to what you as an artist can submit for, based solely on where you come from. What language do you speak? So obviously that is frustrating to you, because why would you set me apart just because of where I come from, of my language? Could that imply that Asian artists belong in a separate category? Because intention is not the same thing as perception. As I said before, I don't think the Grammys meant for this to be harmful for anybody, but the way that it comes across, it is very hurtful for not only BTS, but for the entire industry. So I must admit that when I first heard that BTS was boycotting, let's call it that, I was a little bit surprised. I understood why, but I didn't really try to investigate too much on what that meant and why they were doing that in the first place, until I looked at the official rules of the Grammys. So there's a lot of misinformation regarding that if BTS submitted for the Grammy, they would not be allowed to compete in the general field categories. But that is not exactly true. I mean, they could still apply to Album of the Year, Song of the Year, Record of the Year, and all of these categories, because those are not under the umbrella of any genre as per se. Like, for example, if you're a rock artist, you can submit for the Album of the Year. If you're a hip-hop artist, you can submit for Album of the Year. It's not defined by genre, at least that we know of. So I think there are like in total about 200 categories aside from the general field categories. And those are normally under a specific field. The thing is, you can only submit one single song per category. For example, just to make this more clear, let's just hypothetically think that you are a Korean pop artist, correct? And you make Korean music, you make a Korean record that did so well that you want to submit for the Grammys. So you have to choose between what category you want to submit to. Because guess what? You can only submit one song per fucking category in that field. So with your song, let's say you're between submitting Best Asian Pop and Best Pop Duo Group Performance, and you can only submit to one of those. You cannot submit to both. That's where the problem comes in, because it is obvious, if you've been following the Grammys for a while, it is so clear that the bigger category out of those two is obviously Best Pop Duo Group. I mean, it's even a category that it's announced at the main event. Contrary, I don't think that they would ever be announcing Best Asian Pop at the main event. I don't think so. I highly doubt that. So there's two types of people here. The ones that decide to take the risk and submit for Best Pop Duo Group Performance despite of your possibilities, because you're actually competing with like literally everybody within the pop industry. Or you could be the other kind of people that decides to submit for Best Asian Pop. And what does that do? That separates you from the general, more appealing category. So whether we like it or not being able to submit for both categories, it's a segregation on its own. Because what they're doing is, you know what, I don't understand why you would ever submit for this harder categories, so we're giving this to you instead, because maybe you'll have more chances of winning. Even if they didn't mean that to happen, it does comes across as something very harmful for the entire industry. That is the part that I find genuinely ridiculous, because you cannot simply segregate people from the language that they're speaking and give them a category that they might have more chance of winning. Now, let's imagine in this case that BTS hypothetically didn't boycott the Grammys and actually are submitting for them this year, because I think this is a topic worth discussing. What could have happened if BTS didn't boycott the Grammys? Let's talk about Arirang for a second, because that has been their latest album. Was Arirang actually BTS' best possible Grammy submission? And I'm gonna be very transparent on this. Probably not. I don't think that Arirang has been their best project to date. It has been very poorly rated by critics in the industry, but hey, it's not a bad album. I think it's pretty good, but it's not the best record that they've had. And if the Grammys were fair to some sort of degree, I think BTS should already have a Grammy, because I think they have released better projects. My point is that my most realistic prediction for a nomination for BTS this year would be Best Pop Duo Group Performance. I don't think, I mean, if I didn't say this already, they could have not submitted for Best Asian Pop in the first place, because, I mean, for that category, you need to speak an Asian language. And if they, per se, wanted to submit Swim for that category, they would not apply. So obviously, in that case, they would go for Best Pop Duo Group Performance. And I think realistically, they would have been nominated. I think it was a very impactful record, not only in the US, but like globally. But as I said, that record is in English, so would they have been nominated for any general field? I don't think so. And I say that with like a pain in my heart. I don't think they would have been nominated in the first place. Why is it important that an artist like BTS stands up against the Grammys? Because by saying, hey, we're not participating in this category, it draws attention to a much bigger industry problem. They're one of the few artists big enough to challenge the institution, because if it's not BTS, then who? Then who would ever dare to question this fucking giant in music? BTS has enormous global influence, and I'm very insistent on this. They don't need a Grammy validation in the same way a smaller artist might. If BTS isn't the one standing up against the system, who else could realistically challenge this problem? As I said before, BTS is not just standing up for themselves. I think that they're standing up for the entire Asian pop industry. Their decision opens a conversation that extends far beyond just BTS. And since their response against this issue, what has been the response that the Recording Academy has had since BTS decided to boycott this new category? So recently, the CEO of the Recording Academy, Harvey Mason Jr., issued a statement directly addressing BTS' decision to not submit for the 2027 awards, saying, and I quote, I am saddened to hear that BTS has chosen not to participate in the Grammy Awards process this year. But as a music creator, I understand and respect their decision. I do want to clarify something that seems to be getting lost in the conversation. The Asian pop category was created to celebrate the depth, diversity, and extraordinary growth of pop artistry coming out of Asia. The spirit of this new category is to shine a dedicated spotlight on this important artist. More categories mean more artists' work is recognized. It's never to divide, but to expand who is recognized by our 15,000 Grammy voters. So basically, out of the whole statement, that seems to be the general idea that he conveys with his message. Very, very professional, I would say. That is one response that a Grammy member had about this issue. But there is another one that I also would like to point out because it's very fucking different from the one that I just read. So this comes from the creator of the category of Asian pop. You should be seeing it on screen right now. It's very long, but I will summarize it. I will leave the screenshots on the screen, but basically she takes a little bit more of a defensive stance on this whole response that the Asian pop has been creating, and overall this whole fucking statement is like a PR fucking nightmare. Instead of recognizing why this category might create division, she stands up and defends her actions rather than recognizing why this might be a problem in the first place. If you have a controversy as big as this one, the least thing you can do is trying to make it bigger, because basically what she's saying is that people don't understand. I think that the wording for this statement was very condescending to the root of this problem. So I leave it on screen if you want to read it. But she finishes with something like, "Thank you to everybody who has always remained true and trying to make real change both through the inside and outside actions and gotten off the internet and fucking keeping it real." I think this has been like one of the worst responses that they could have done. As I said, I don't think she meant any harm with the whole category, but we need to understand that intent does not equal perception. And if an artist is upset by your category, the worst thing that you can do is call them the fuck out, especially their fans as well, because obviously they're gonna be upset. If the artist is upset, then they're going to be upset as well. But anyways, I won't dive too much into that. I'll leave you the whole statement on the screen if you want to pause and read it. And there's also a third report that I want to talk about. By the time that I'm recording this is the end of August, and a couple of days ago, Billboard reported that they were meeting with very influential companies that define what Asian pop is. Very big players in the industry. I think they even mentioned Hive. The purpose of this is to have a meeting and talk about whether the Asian pop does make a change for artists, and if it does serve a purpose by existing, and by recognizing artists within that category in the first place. So I saw one report suggesting that they might cancel the Best Asian Pop category, but again, I would take this with a very cautious approach. It's only one report that made this statement, but basically they're saying that there's that possibility in discussion. But personally, I want to talk about what the most possible outcomes of this whole idea could be. My prediction is that they're going to keep it, at least for this year. It would be kind of like fucking insane that they introduced it and then they removed it in that same year. I do think that they're going to continue it, and that would entail that there's going to be an artist that gets this award in 2027. However, I do not think that it's going to continue beyond that because of all of this controversy that it has created over this past month. So here comes some possible actions that the Grammys might take. First, modify the category, modify the rules, hopefully for the better. They might rework on the eligibility of it, or they eventually fucking remove it. I don't know what they're going to do, but if you ask me, and I think they're just going to modify the rules of it, because obviously I think that every single artist wants to be recognized, wants to represent their ethnicity, their music, and such, but it has to be more grounded to what they want to do, because every single action that has led to this place has been perceived as a personal attack to Asian music. You cannot categorize a song solely on the fact of where it comes from. If you ask me, the Grammys are a night to celebrate music. And yeah, having a Grammy, winning a Grammy could possibly mean more a prestigious role in the music industry. But besides that, I think it's just a trophy. I value the things that go way beyond a tangible thing. I personally enjoy the Grammys because it's a night to celebrate music, to celebrate the enormous impact that these artists have made on the world with their projects, with their records, with music in general. But anything beyond that seems a little bit of a stretch to me, because if you really think about it, the Grammys, as any other awards, are just a trophy. I mean, yeah, it could give you more reputation within the music industry, but besides that, it's just something tangible that represents nothing if you have no impact within that music industry. After all this time, I am very relieved with the idea that BTS has come to terms with the fact that they do not need a Grammy. They will never need a Grammy. And yeah, I mean, a Grammy is obviously nice to have, but it doesn't amount to the greater impact that one's music makes at a global scale. Because trust me on this, I think there are a lot of winning Grammy artists that would just wish to have the impact that BTS has gotten throughout the years. They stand up for something more meaningful and something bigger than themselves. The question overall is whether the Grammys can actually keep calling themselves the biggest night in music, while artists this globally significant feel like they have to choose between recognition and categorization. Hopefully, sooner than later, we can start to see more global acts be recognized the same way that music in English has been. I mean, we can think about last year, the album of the year went to Bad Bunny, which is the first time that a non-English album has ever won that category. I mean, can you believe it? I hope to see more of this change for the better, to try to include more diverse backgrounds into the Grammy discussion, to try to get them where they actually deserve to be in a fair and square competition. So at the end of the day, we can celebrate what music actually is, because music is not about language. Music is not about where you come from. It's about art and how it's impacted the people around the world. And this would be my final message on this. I hope things get better as time goes on. I will try to keep myself updated on whatever comes out. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I think this has been a very meaningful discussion to try to get my thoughts out of my head and try to share them with somebody else that might think the same way as me. And if you don't think the same way, I am very open to talking in the comments, but let me know what you think. Let me know what you think is going to happen, what the Grammys are going to do. I mean, it has not been the first time that somebody as big as BTS has decided to boycott the Grammys. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before that. The Weeknd also boycotted the Grammys for a long period of time, and it was just a recent Grammys that he came back after having a meaningful discussion with Harvey Mason Jr., the CEO. But yeah, I mean, I hope everything can turn out for the better. The Grammys actually do learn about this experience. I mean, I'd love to hear your comments if you disagree or agree with me. So let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful morning, night, or evening. See you soon.